A very good evening to you as you are joining us once again on Let's Talk with Mordecai Kamanga. I'm your host, Tapiwa Makosa, and I'm happy to be back with another special segment where we are discussing matters of life, matters that help us in our journey, on this earth. And today we've got a special guest, and we are going to be discussing one of the interesting topics that for some haven't been really spoken about. But we are happy to have this platform and also to be in association with individuals who have dedicated their time to pass knowledge to others. So, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, help me welcome Chiedza. I'll say Chiedza Chikosi because I've forgotten the second surname. Help
It's
me
fine.
welcome Chiedza to Let's Talk. Hello, Chiedza.
Hi, Tapiwa. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much. It's a pleasure having you here to talk about your all things African parenting, which is quite a unique name, but which is also kind of like self-explanatory of what it does. So
Mhm.
maybe to begin with, you can just tell us about who you are or what you do, and maybe what are your personal experiences that led you to follow this path of either social work and into parenting.
Okay. My name is Chiedza Chikosi. I think I'm a social worker and I'm also training to be a parenting coach. I have a deep passion in parenting. And I think this was experienced by my childhood experiences. I think many people can agree with me that a lot of African cultures have a top-down culture where I think the culture is more of respect our elders, and I think there's a lot of emphasis on respect and obedience from children. So I think that's where many of my experiences came from. It was more of my experience of a top-down leadership culture, not just within the household, but even at schools, institutions, churches as well, religion. It's very difficult to separate religion and culture within, I think, within Zimbabwe or many African countries, if I'm actually right. So um, I think it came from those experiences and also questioning how some of the aspects of how I was raised and some of my personal experiences of how I was raised. That is when my passion came, um, wanting to advocate for children, advocating for children to be protected, and advocating for a culture that's more authoritative more than authoritarian. So I think that's where my passion came from. And I do think children need to be protected, and I do think um, we need to evolve from top-down cultures to cultures that model what we are trying to teach our children. I think in a nutshell, that's where it came from. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this interview, because this lady has taken away every other thing I was going to ask in 1 minute, in a few statements. But thank you so much for that. And this is who you are. And you touched already on several aspects that you dropped in about parenting. You spoke about top down. Could you care to maybe explain, because there might be somebody who's listening now, and they don't really understand what do you mean it's a top down, or what do you mean by it's authoritative, and how is it different from authoritarian? It's a conversation. Let's just kind of
Okay.
dive deep into that. What exactly do you mean about those terms that you have used, that
Okay.
we can communicate to our viewers who are of wide ranging understanding on some of these aspects?
Okay. When I actually talk about a top-down culture, it's a culture where people in positions of leadership have the ultimate power, basically. So they determine and decide what happens. And I think particularly for children, it's more about taking away that voice from children. I do think that people who are older, or people in positions of leadership, or people in positions of power do have knowledge, and they probably have better knowledge than children. But I do think that respect is not about, or teaching respect is not about demanding it from children. I think it's about modeling it in a way that is empathetic and also guiding. When it's authoritarian, it means you do as I say and you don't question me. You can't even ask why. Whereas if you are an authoritative parent, you're trying to guide your child with empathy and also giving them reasons for them to understand why something is being done. You're helping them develop an internal moral compass as opposed to just do as I say. You don't need to ask why we are doing what we are doing. I think that's how I can explain it.
Okay, that's quite interesting. As you're speaking, you spoke of religion. I'm having quite a few verses jumping at me right now. Some of
Yes.
them you know them because this is not the first time you're having this conversation. And I
Mm-hmm.
was going on my Bible app just to make sure growing up at school we were taught this. There was this one teacher, he taught mathematics, and he
Mm-hmm.
used to quote this scripture. um Shamu yakanaka inoraisira upenzi kure. It was like his way of interpreting spare the rod and spoil the child.
Mm-hmm.
you know how do you classify now uh such parenting behaviors or tips where we have got I don't want to call it punishment, but I think in this world now it's termed some form of like physical punishment when you're gonna be beat. Maybe you've done something, a kid has done something wrong, and then make sure corporal punishment. I think that's the term that is used.
Mm-hmm.
Corporal punishment, which I think it's a scary term because, and I will argue as what people used to tend to argue to say, well, we had corporal punishment and we turned out fine. How then are you? What is the difference? What is that which might you are saying is need to be adapted, need to be changed, not necessarily to say it is wrong or it is right? What's your view on that?
Okay. Basically, um, from I'm going to it's an interesting question, but I'm going to delve into a lot of academic research as well. Um, I think it wouldn't
Uh-huh.
be fair for me. I'm not sure, but I would argue that many social workers wouldn't agree with corporal punishment. The reason being there is a lot of academic evidence that suggests its long-term harm on children. And it basically, to just make it easy, it is, in my opinion, it is violence. Spanking is violence. And basically, if you are modeling it and you are hitting a child all their life, and then when they are older, you're now then telling them not to hit their wife. I think behavior is not learned like that. Behavior, and then you then now tell them to stop beating their wives, or you're telling them to stop beating whoever. I think we are raising children promoting violence, and then when they are
But
older, we get an issue with it.
But isn't that the extreme case? I'm gonna be the advocate and not necessarily the devil's one, but just an advocate for so that you maybe explain. Uh, isn't that
Okay.
taking things to the extreme? In as much as I appreciate that there is a body of knowledge, you are a social
Yes.
worker.
Yes.
I've got limited knowledge on that,
Yes.
but the father was spanking the child.
Mm-hmm.
The father wasn't spanking the mother for the child to say, because you spanked me, now I'm gonna spank my wife. Do you get what I'm saying? In as much as I understand that there might be maybe the hurt that can be developed, the trauma, the PTSDs that we speak about. I'm not necessarily advocating for violence, but then don't we tend to draw on to the extremes of things? Because uh what is the outcome that parents should look for their children? What is that which is a wholesome individual that is going to be developed with this hardened, maybe let's say African approach? If your mom looks at you with an eye, it tells you everything about you, and there's gonna be a spanking when the visitors are gone. And maybe with the experiences of what we have seen, what we have been learning, and what we are getting to understand in, let's say, now the Western world and things like that. Sorry, it's convoluted, but I hope you get the
It's all
point.
right. Yeah. Okay. When you say we are moving to extremes, I genuinely don't think they're extremes, because this is how behavior works. Behavior is modeled, and that is how we learn how to behave. I think it's a principle that you are ingraining in children to say, when you are unhappy about something, this is how you deal with conflict. You don't necessarily, you have to use pain to manage behavior. And when they are in positions of power, and I'm not necessarily talking only about spanking, I'm talking about methods such as shouting and yelling. All those types of methods, in my opinion, they fall under authoritarian types of parenting. There are actually healthy ways in which you can raise children, and you can guide children without necessarily having to resort to violence. Social learning, we learn by seeing how people behave. It's like something as easy as, you will see that when you have a child, like I'll speak for myself. There was a lot of things I had to unlearn. And a lot of times I find myself wanting to yell, because that is the default in how I was raised. So it now takes a conscious effort for you to go against that. And I would want to think, when you are upset, how you were shown how to deal with specific behaviors is basically how you will end up raising your children. So I think if we want to raise children who don't end up being violent to their partners, I think it starts from little things like that. That's how I see it.
Okay, that's quite interesting. Um, Maybe let's bring it back, because then the question, what I've been trying to put across is, this is the African parent that we get to know. We read
Yes,
stories on X, we read stories on Facebook, and you read Nigerian stories, Ghanaian stories, Tanzanian stories.
yes,
You
yes,
realize, like, what, the way you were dealt with is kind of like the same way has been dealt with. It's
yes,
the similar stories.
yes, yes,
But then here you say, now this is all things African parenting, but it
yes.
seemingly is introducing something that is contrary, not necessarily on the, not pulling the polars of positive or negative, but that is on the contrary of what has been going on in what is considered African parenting, where we do not spare the rod, where we say, yes, we don't want to say every bad behavior is going to be is going to be given, what do you call it? It is going to be met by spanking, or by being beat, or by pain. But
Mm-hmm,
don't doesn't even using that corrective measure of pain. I'm on pain, on spanking.
mm-hmm,
Is there no way it is helpful in instilling, maybe, I'll give you another experience from school. I grew
mm-hmm.
up with I grew up with my grandparents, so I was rarely beaten, and I came
Okay,
out right.
okay.
But at school I was beaten, and we have a teacher, like that teacher I'm
Mm-hmm,
talking about. At one point, he said, I failed. I got 24 out of 25 in a maths test, and
mm-hmm,
the reason, he said, everyone below 80% you're going to be beat, but Makosa, I'm going to beat you because the math that you failed, it's a simple math. And he called me to the board, the chalkboards back in Zim, and he
mm-hmm,
said, to work out this math. It was long addition. So long addition, but then the numbers were amounting to 20. So you carry 2, not carry 1.
Mm-hmm.
So in my calculations, when I do the carry over, I carried 1,
Mm-hmm.
to the 10th, from the units to the 10th. So then he was like, so do you think that's the answer? Class, so he kind of explained to say, this is the reason that I'm going to beat you, because you are better than this,
Okay.
So for you to remember to carry 2, I'm going to spank you. In as much as you have got 96%, I don't care about that. I'm going to spank you because you are better to know that when you reach 20, you're going to carry 2 over to the 10s.
Okay.
Now, I've retold this story because it stayed with me, and when I look at that beating ending up in the cupboard, I don't reflect on it to say, "Oh, that was bad of him. Why did he beat me? I was at the top, the highest."
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
reflect from it in the terms of like in as much as it was hurting, but I'm now more diligent in my working of mathematics because I knew there is Mr. Schlemmer out there who's gonna beat me if I go 24 out of 25 because I didn't carry 2 when I carried 1.
Okay. No, I hear you, and I think you've touched on a few points which I've been writing down to address them
Okay.
specifically. Firstly, you said there are some of us who were beaten and we came out right, right?
Yeah.
I think the word right is a very subjective term. When people refer to we were beaten and we came out right, I think people fail to recognize the emotional impact as well as the mental impact that it has on individuals. I think basically when people talk about coming out right, what I've observed, especially when I've had conversations with people, is things like, oh, I came out right, I'm successful, maybe financially, academically, all those things. But I think what we fail to recognize is the emotional impact that spanking has on an individual and the mental impact that it has on an individual. Personally, when I was spanked, but I think that's very subjective. I never found it exciting to be spanked. There was some pain that came with it and some sort of distress that came
Yeah.
with it. So I can't see and also it's very difficult for some parents to draw the line between, okay, now this is okay spanking and this is abuse. And I would like to think that a lot of that spanking actually bordered on abuse. When I talk about
All the
abuse,
anger.
sorry.
Go ahead. I'm saying all the anger, in the marital anger ending up in the children.
Yes, and I don't think that is a good way to model. If a parent is upset, for them to just use their hand, I think it's even though this sounds extreme, but I just feel it's an abuse of power because you can do that and you are in a position to do that. I think there is a healthy and teachable way in which you can still drive your point across and someone will still hear. There are natural consequences. People forget those natural consequences. People forget, you can set consequences that are within reason, that don't necessarily have to do with pain. And I think people don't want to acknowledge that. And also, you mentioned about my platform being all things African parenting. I think one thing I probably didn't mention when I gave an introduction of my platform is that I challenge harmful normalized practices within our African context. So I'm looking at things that I feel these things need to change. We need to move with the times. We need to move with the research that is out there in order to raise healthier children. And for me, when I look at culture, I don't see it as static. I think when we look back, there was a point in time when we used to kill twins, right? And it was normalized at that point in time. But we questioned all that, and I think we have accepted that twins. It's not something that is maybe demonic as people would want to look at it. We've accepted that it's a normal, natural, biological process. and we no longer kill twins. So that's how I approach culture. I don't approach culture as Bible. I think culture can be questioned. People can grow, people can evolve. And I think with cultures, we borrow from each other. Because when you look at Western culture, there was also a point in time when spanking, even in schools, was legal. But because of research, people embrace all that knowledge and they evolve and they change. Because I think ultimately what we want is to create a better world for our children, make the world a better place. And that is the view and the principle in which I decided to set up this whole thing's African parenting. Yeah, there are a lot of good things that African parents do, but I think the purpose of all this is to address things that I feel are harmful, particularly to children. So,
you finish your point.
Yeah, so I was saying, so I think that is where I come from. And the impact, particularly, I'll talk about my work as well, which I've observed that within a specific culture, you'll find some things that are very common. And I think many people will agree with me to say a lot of African parents do use spanking as a parenting technique or parenting tool to raise their children. But what I've observed, particularly for those children who end up having to come to social services due to spanking and parenting, is that the impact it has on children is it erodes their self-esteem, it erodes their confidence, and you can see that it's a fear-based method of parenting. I do think that you can raise your kids in a healthy way, in which they can even respect you, by using other methods that aren't really pain and fear based. Basically, that's what I think.
Okay, maybe
Yeah.
just to touch a bit more on pain.
Mm-hmm.
When you speak of other methods that are not fear based or pain, but isn't there a benefit in pain itself? Looking at humankind,
Yes.
is there any benefit in pain? Because the reality of human life is pain is ever present in humanity. So then
I
the question
agree.
is there I'm saying, is there a benefit in pain? Or maybe what is happening is we have to identify what is then their pain point. I've heard that term, like what is their pain point, and then work on how best to make them feel. Because the child that you want to raise, and you're talking about maybe the dynamism of cultures, and we are learning from other cultures, but
Mm-hmm.
we look at the social ills that are then maybe, okay, fine, from, let's compare Africa and Europe. Look at the
Mm-hmm.
social ills, and what is the difference that is there, between the different continents on the social ills. What is the difference that is there at the outcome of the individuals that are have been raised, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
in Africa, and then a kid that's been raised in the UK, for instance, one raised in Zimbabwe and raised in the UK, or one from Zimbabwe comes here. What is their understanding when they now come to this, relocated to the UK? How do they behave as compared to the Litlands that were born and are being bred under, let's say, under the UK system?
Okay. You spoke about pain. I do think pain is a necessary thing that you have to go through, because I think we can't live a life. You need to be able to build resilience, and we can't live a life where you are avoiding pain. And I actually think in some instances you have to seek this pain. The type of pain that I agree with is a pain that you are seeking yourself, that is not inflicted by someone. And this sort of pain that we are talking about when we are raising children is a pain where it ends up causing harm. It ends up affecting a child in a way where it's affecting their self-esteem. And they, especially when you're inflicting pain, what is that communicating to the child? Is this done in love? Is this done because you care about me? And also, the social ills I feel you're talking about. What exactly do you mean when you say social ills? Are you talking about crime rate? Because when I look at countries like Denmark, where these things aren't even allowed, the crime rate is very low as compared to our African countries, where we hit and we spank a lot. There's actually more violence there. So
But there is
violence breeds violence.
but there is more to, like, case study of Denmark that you have brought up. There
Yes,
is more to their social system. There is more to their economic systems
yes,
that then allows, because while we are talking about this pain and the social outcomes, yeah,
yes,
we also need to be cognizant of, okay, fine, what is their social systems like, what is their
yes,
political systems like,
yes,
and to how they then, because you can even go into how they rehabilitate their prisoners in their
yes,
prison system
yes,
and everything
yes,
else.
yes, yes.
But then for me, that's again the other side of the other extreme, the extreme good.
Yes, that well,
For
I
me,
think
that's the extreme good, because it's a society that has evolved. And if you are, I don't know, with your case studies, if you had to look at how peripheral they are in their goodness, and let's bring it where the majority of us who are probably going to end up with, in as much as we are probably aiming to be at Denmark.
absolutely, and I don't think there is any harm in wanting to aim for the extreme good. I think that's where we
Mhm.
should all be wanting to go. And you talk about social systems and political systems within Denmark. Those, when you look at our social systems and our political systems, I think you would agree with me that many of them are top down, right? When I say top down, they are very authoritarian, not
Mhm.
just within the political system, but when you look at even institutions, it trickles down to even how the parents parent. You do as I say, not as I do, which is this very same thing I'm talking about, to say we need to challenge that and find an approach where we are modeling what we want our children to do. If we are raising our children with violence and then we tell them violence is wrong, I think we are being, if you think something is wrong, then I think you shouldn't be doing it. If your actions are doing what you are saying is wrong, then I think there's a contrast there, and I don't think it's aligning. Basically, that's what I think. So
Okay.
we need to, if we are saying, okay, Denmark is the extreme good, how did they get there? I'm sure they even questioned the harms and the impact on children. They read the research, they did their research, and they kept changing culture. And I think that's what we need to do as Africans. I think that's what I would advocate for. um it's an extreme good that we should all endeavor for, because I think what we should all want to do is to limit harm or decrease harm.
Okay, no, that's brilliant. If you are joining us, we are I want to say in conversation. We are let's talk, and today I'm joined by Chiedza, and we are talking all things African parenting, and we're just having a discussion about how uh, parenting needs to evolve, and where we need to get new best practices that are available, so that we raise our children better. And the place of pain, we touched a bit on the place of pain, and emulating countries that have managed to evolve, like Denmark, per example. So if you are enjoying this conversation, may you please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. What are your thoughts on parenting your children? How best for those that have relocated maybe from Africa? You are now in a Western world, and there are different rules. The social services are near you and everything else. How are you going about that? Because that is what we want to delve into. Chiedza, back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most of the parents that, case in example for Zimbabweans, after
Mm-hmm.
COVID, the
Mm-hmm.
teams, the batches that came, it was
Mm-hmm.
social care. Coming into
Mm-hmm.
social care, it's shifts, and it's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
shifts. And you are coming into areas where you have to make sure you take your kid to school.
Mm-hmm.
You are not just going to say, "Oh, go to school," like what you do back home. To say, "Oh, wake up, no, go to school." How now? How do you? What can you say for these parents to create maybe a healthy parent-child bond in an African home that is now transplanted in let's say in the UK?
Okay. You Am I right to say that you're talking particularly about time and the demand that you know that comes
Um,
with doing these long shifts? Yeah.
yeah, I'm just talking general parenting in the context of the
Okay.
UK, especially with this badge. This,
Mm-hmm.
let me say our batch, the batch that came after COVID, we are
Okay.
the demands of time shifts,
Okay.
availability, and things like that. What can you give as a practical tip to say, okay, fine, we understand that this is the demands of your job. You're working on COS, you have to meet the hours, but then
Mm-hmm.
you've got a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Then what happens then is, I see, like, what's prevalent is, or it's if the father is at work at night, the mom is there at home, but then
Mm-hmm.
it's just for a few hours, because in the morning the mom is going to go to work, father
Mm-hmm.
does the morning run and then goes to sleep. But how best can they include family bonding and even
Okay.
parental and child bonding? Practical tips on that.
Okay. Yeah, I think that is a very difficult situation. I think I need to acknowledge that. And there are certain and specific situations where you can see that um, because of maybe finances and things like that, and the hours that people need to do, some things are actually unavoidable in terms of the shift patterns and things like that. But I think there are specific things that you can do to strengthen the parent and child bond. And it all comes with intentionality. I get it that maybe parents are doing different shifts, but I think it's important to have that connection time with the child. It doesn't have to be the whole day. It can even be 30 minutes in a day where you are connecting with the child, depending on their age, giving them one-to-one specific time where maybe you are playing, because some children, depending on the age, how you spend that time with them, it's playing. You could put music, dance to the music. That strengthens the connection. Or maybe 1 hour after school, you've done a school run, you decide, oh, let's go and eat McDonald's, or let's do this. You're doing something together. Or you have a time where you can just chat, how is school, how are things. It's all about intentionality. I get it that the time sometimes and the hours need to be met. But unfortunately, when you're raising children and you want to raise healthy, connected children, they do need that time. They do need that time. I do understand their time constraints, but the connection needs to be there, and it can actually be a routine to say, when do I have maybe a day off? Maybe that is the time in which you schedule your connection time with your child. And to be fair, children need time. So if you do not give them that time, one thing will suffer. It's either your children or your job. So I think it's also about choosing the hard. I remember having a conversation with someone I deeply respect now. He started football club, and he was saying this is not even a person who came on a COS visa, but he was saying he's a mental health nurse, and he was saying he was busy with shifts until his son got involved in drugs, and he ended up dying, in these drug issues. And now he started a football club where he is trying to keep teenage children occupied. And it doesn't need to get there for you to do something about giving your children time. Because if you do not give your children time, someone is giving them time, someone is occupying them. And you do not want that to be a wrong person or someone who ends up influencing them to end up getting involved in drugs and alcohol. So as much as I get it, it's hard, but we have a parental responsibility as parents. I'm not saying take the whole day, but I'm saying being intentional. Even if it's 30 minutes in your day, even if it's an hour, or even if it's something to do that connects you with the child. Sometimes it's to do the things like going out with, if you've got 3, 4 children, going out with them together once a week, even to the park, or watching a movie together, and then having that one-to-one time where you are connecting with the child. Is everything okay at school? Do you have any worries? I think that's very important, because as much as we have a financial burden as parents, I think it's also our responsibility to provide that emotional connection and communication with our children.
No, that's profound what you said there. So you spoke about intentionality,
Yes.
and is it the same when you talk about intentional parenting? Is it the same with conscious parenting, or is
Yeah,
it different?
I do think it's the same. Being
No,
intentional means you are aware, and when you are conscious of something, I think you are aware. So you are being intentional about your actions. So I do think it's the same thing here.
no, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I believe when you started this work, you've had people that you spoke of this gentleman. Well, I'm
Yes,
assuming it's a gentleman now,
yes,
who lost a child,
yes,
and then realized, what I was, and then they are creating a safe hub
yes,
for these other
yes,
people to come.
yes.
Um, with in your experience, have there been some people who have approached you, maybe saying their fears? What do parents fear most when they are parenting, in this new environment? And even apart from this new environment, because I'm realizing I'm making it more more UK centric, but even what are the fears in parenting? Let's speak to this newly soon to be parents, the basic fears. What do they expect? How best should they maybe plan or think around the issues of how to get around the issues to do with parenting, raising a kid, and things like that?
Yeah, I think particularly within the African community, the number one fear is that if I get rid of spanking, then I'm going to automatically raise a child who is spoiled. What do I replace it with? I think that's the number one fear, because that's probably the only thing that they've probably used to correct behavior. But I don't, and that fear is valid, because nobody wants to raise a spoiled child, or nobody wants to raise a child who ends up in jail, or a child who ends up being a burden to the society. Nobody wants that. And I think it's a valid thing to worry about. And I don't think any all these parents who spank their children are doing it out of them being mean parents. I think they are doing good. But I just think they do not know, other strategies, which I tend to share. And these are research-based strategies to show that they actually do work, you know. So I think it's more about, it's okay to evolve, it's okay to change, it's okay to actually read books and say, okay, if I'm getting rid of spanking, what other methods out there? Can I try them? Can I actually work? Look at the effects
Can you
of
give
those
us a
methods.
practical on that? Give us a practical example, because
I'll,
somebody
I'll
is probably,
yes,
give us a scenario and say, okay, fine. Instead of you getting the feather duster and beating what other ways can you discipline your child? Communicate that pain. Communicate also that what you did, no, I do not approve it. The essence
okay,
of the lesson that needs to be shared.
okay.
Practicals.
A lot of the things are things that seem maybe basic. I'll talk about modeling. I actually think that's the most powerful method of parenting, or tool to parent children. Modeling. It's showing how to behave. So if you believe that this is how a child should behave, if you want to teach manners, for example, you do not you treat the child with respect. You want to teach them manners. You say, when they give you something, you say thank you to them. You don't just say thank you, but you are not showing that specific behavior that you want within a child. That's the most powerful, I think, tool when it comes to parenting. If you do not like your child, I want to think of something. Maybe talking on the phone while they are eating, then maybe I think you should model the same thing that you are expecting your child not to do. If you don't want your child to hit other kids and you are hitting them at home, that is not going to work, because they learn that if you are unhappy about something, you express it through hitting. They are going to exert violence to other children. So I think modeling is the most powerful way to parent. Emotional regulation, for example. You want to raise children who are emotionally regulated. You have to learn how to control your own emotions. And those children are learning. They see how you handle a crisis. Are you breathing in? Are you shouting? Are you making it difficult for everyone around you when you experience a specific crisis? And through that, that is actually the most powerful way in which you can teach your children how to regulate emotions and to deal with specific situations. And then simple things like clear communication, your expectations. This is what I expect. A, B, C, D. When this happens, I'm going to come at a specific time. They seem like simple things, but clear communication to a child will actually help you avoid certain behaviors. And then we have things like natural consequences. That's also something to rely on. If you keep telling a child not to jump on a chair and they don't listen to you, it's not everything that needs spanking. Sometimes when they fall off that chair and they break their leg, I think that's a better lesson than you actually spanking them. Those are things we can actually rely on. I'm not saying leave a child to run in the road. That's an extreme case. But natural consequences are actually useful lessons.
No,
Yes, you wanted
I
to say
do
something.
get that. I feel like you skated my point. I'm talking
Yes,
at a
what
point where
point?
you know
Which point?
the intervention that is needed here is a spanking. But I want
No,
to change. So yes, modeling is right. I think from the way you have expressed modeling, I like it, and I totally get you and I totally agree with what you said, But I'm talking of like you are at that moment where there is supposed to be a reward here,
yeah, no, I get that. And
which is
I get that.
pain.
I get that.
But
I was going to come to
we-
that, but I was going to come
okay,
to that,
okay,
but
all
that's
right.
the very last thing I like to talk about, because I do think that in the hierarchy of parenting tools, that's the
Mm-hmm.
least thing I would want to pull out. You are talking about punishment, and this shouldn't be an everyday thing. I think this is the thing that you tend to pull out when it's absolutely necessary. It's not something that is a go-to. This is why I'm talking about modeling, clear communication, natural consequences. There are also consequences that you as a parent can put in place. For example, I'll give a practical example where I was telling my child, you need to stop throwing those books, and he kept throwing those books. How I then intervened was I simply took that book and I put it away. I didn't need to spank him, I just put the consequence where I took away. And if I'm unhappy about something, say there are specific privileges, you can take away those privileges. For a child, that is actually very painful, you taking away those privileges. But that's not something I would think that's the go-to, because behavior is influenced by a whole lot of things. And I think what ranks at the top is things like modeling, clear communication, and then there's also positive and negative reinforcement, where you are rewarding the behaviors that you want. When you reward specific
Mm-hmm.
behaviors you want, you tend to see more of those behaviors. So if they see that, oh, okay, when I do this, I get all this reward, well done, you're doing really well, there's not many children, even for adults. If I'll give an example, if your wife keeps pointing out things that you are messing up, I think that has a negative impact on you, other than them continuously saying thank you, you did this really well, you did, rewarding the behavior that you want. It actually encourages more behavior. So when you talk about that, I don't believe in spanking, but you can do put natural consequences where maybe you are taking away privileges, you are having to tell them don't do this and things like that. But spanking is a no for me, because I think it encourages violence.
No, now that's good. That's good. And ladies and gentlemen, I think you are enjoying this conversation. I'm actually enjoying it. I'm just conscious of what the producer has told us today. So I'm
Okay.
watching on the clock on what said. But I want you to, I've got this question here.
Yes.
What message would you want to give to a parent who feels that, you know what, I think I've already failed my child? Chiedza, I wish I had known you or have heard of you. At this point, I think she's gone or he's gone, and I don't know. I think I'm a failure. I failed at parenting.
Okay. Um, the message I would want to tell that parent is that even for a good parent, there is no perfect parent. Even for parents who are endeavoring to raise their children well, there is no perfect parent. And recognizing that you failed your child, I think that's a very big step. Particularly within our African communities, we struggle to acknowledge when we've made mistakes and when we have caused harm. Acknowledging that to yourself is the first step. And then going to your child and actually acknowledging to say, you know what, I messed up. It's actually okay for a parent to apologize to their child. It's okay to say, I'm sorry, I messed up on A, B, C, and D. That actually also helps your relationship with that child, and that helps them heal. I know for some parents, they have a big ego to say, I can't go and apologize to my child. And when I was talking about modeling, I go and apologize to my son to say, you know what, I didn't handle that thing really well. I shouldn't have yelled. What I'm actually doing to that child, I'm helping them heal and helping them to understand that what I did wasn't right, and that is not how you treat your child if you are upset. So it's actually okay to say, I'm sorry, I messed up. How can we work towards our relationship? And when they tell you how they want you to work towards that relationship, listen and don't be defensive. That's how you help that relationship, and people can actually heal from relationships that are broken by people just acknowledging, you know what, I messed up. Let's work together. What do you need from me? I think that's what I can say. We all mess up, and I mess up. Even, I'm not saying, and it depends on a scale, because I'm aware that spanking is wrong. I'm aware that threats and shouting and yelling is not the way I want to raise my child, and I know the harm it would cause to my child, and I'll probably apologize, but I'm not perfect. The issue is about acknowledging that you are not a perfect human being, and apologizing, and then repairing the relationship. That's what I would say.
No, that's mouthful. And I hope our listeners are enjoying this as much as I'm enjoying it, and I'm happy it's going to be posted, and be available to them. So, as a way of reflecting, Chiesa,
Yes,
if you could speak to your younger self,
yes,
or maybe to your
yes,
parents who raised you,
yes,
with all now this knowledge and understanding, with this,
yes,
well, in religious terms, I would say revelation, but with this
yes.
knowledge,
I get that. Yeah.
what would you say to them?
I would say I wasn't expecting you to be perfect parents. You had the knowledge you had. Um, you did what you thought was best, right? However, as a child, if I come and I say this was hateful, this caused harm in what way? it's actually okay to help, to acknowledge, it's not, I don't think I'm trying to diminish all the other good things that you did. But I think a relationship can be mended by those things that I'm saying. This was hateful. This could have been done in a different way. I think that's what I would say. It's not to say you were bad parents, but I think it's to say things could have been better. And the best way to mend a relationship is to acknowledge the hate that someone is saying. And even though I know we can say my intention wasn't that, but impact matters more than intention. I think that's what I would say.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's powerful, because I'm like, if you go into a parent and you're telling them, you know what, the way you raised me wasn't the best way. I was, you mwana wangu wandakabereka. You know, the kid that I bore, how do you tell me how to parent you? Now you think, because you see some of these things, they appear in other sectors, they appear in
Mm-hmm.
other environments, and you can
Mm-hmm.
actually tell, like you were saying, talking about the top down approach. You know,
Mm-hmm.
this is what I do here if nobody else
Mm-hmm.
can question me. And
Mm-hmm.
it appears in different sectors and fibers.
Mm-hmm.
um but I wanted to read this scripture
Mm-hmm.
from Colossians,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you know it. Colossians chapter 3 verse uh 21.
Mm-hmm.
Fathers, do not provoke your children lest they
Mm-hmm.
become discouraged. And
Mm-hmm.
this is one of the verses that kind of goes under the water, because
Mm-hmm.
we emphasize on of your lives may be,
Mm-hmm.
added, or may be
Mm-hmm.
longer. But also, I think the Bible also addresses the issue of parenthood. I've got one of my former pastors that I
Mm-hmm.
lived with. He preached a message called "Offices" at a wedding. I was the interpreter, and
Okay.
he really touched on how each and every individual operates in their different offices. But
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
just as at a workplace, these
Mm-hmm.
offices should also have got clear lines of communication, and how
Absolutely.
you should approach, in as much as you might be the head, in as much as you might be the father, in as much
Mm-hmm.
as this is a child. The scripture here
Mm-hmm.
is actually saying, do not provoke your children lest they be discouraged. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe it speaks to what you've been saying.
Mm-hmm.
Also the ideas of intentionality. Discouragement comes from, am I being approved, am I being accepted? Because nucleus family is what is supposed to be the very first, and I believe is the fundamental support system that should exist
Absolutely.
for
Yes.
for every child. Before a
Mm-hmm.
child is celebrated elsewhere, they
Mm-hmm.
must be celebrated in the home in which they are being raised.
I
And they
agree.
can only see that they are being celebrated when,
Mm-hmm.
like you say, they see that modeling, when they see that relationship between the parents, the
Mm-hmm.
relationship between them and the parents.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps build and nurture this well-rounded individual that will be of benefit to the society. Look at me sounding more like I know anything. um but
Yeah.
before we go,
Mhm.
you wanted to say something?
No, I think I love everything you've just said. This and I think it's a beautiful summary. I do agree that the family should be the safe space where the child knows that outside there I can come back and fall back. You know. Um,
Yes,
yes.
yes, yes. Sometimes when we speak of these things, when I'm right now as I'm speaking, I'm remembering my own experiences, the way I was brought up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to lie, I grew up in a good home. I'm loved big at home.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Despite all my mistakes, despite all my craziness and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Mm-hmm.
because at home we had, I'll give you an example. At our house,
Mm-hmm.
in my grandfather's household, how we grew up is,
Mm-hmm.
if you went on a journey,
Mm-hmm.
so let's say we lived in Glendale. So if you
Mm-hmm.
travel to Harare and
Mm-hmm.
come back, Just you were sent either to pay a bill, but because you went to Harare and come back at night after eating, we would sit down and would ask you, tell us about the journey. Or Ndepai, we
Wow.
call it Ndepai.
Wow.
So it's
Wow.
more of like, tell us what happened. So it's everybody is there and you start narrating. And we say you start narrating from the moment you stepped out of the door to the veranda. We
Wow.
want to know all the steps that you took to say, oh, from the veranda, you know, so it creates that environment of knowing, like, when uh, as I'm going to experience outside, I've got people that are expecting to hear how I experience the outside. And then we it also became also a platform where we I got to know and understand some things about Harare before I even go to Harare, because I would hear stories being brought by my uncles about what they experience in those areas as a way of bonding as a family. So these are some of the things that you say. You know, I think in other spheres they speak of like, oh, dinner time. That's when you talk. Oh, how was your
Mhm,
day? Stuff
mhm,
like that.
mhm,
You know,
mm,
creating some sort of ritual. You know, from a religious
mm,
perspective, you are talking of prayer time, but sometimes prayer time becomes an issue of like, oh, come here now, let's read the Bible. That's
mhm,
not proper connection. It's more like, oh, it's time to read the Bible, but all the
yes.
while everybody else was elsewhere and doing their
Mm,
own thing. You know,
mhm,
they didn't connect. It's more like the ritual of like, oh, now one to read the verse and pray together. But to say, okay, what are you struggling with? Okay, is there any challenge? Do you have a prayer request? What are the troubles? You know, um trust me, I will keep on talking. I will consult, I will consult with the producer if I do have many questions, but he's indicated time for me.
okay.
I do have many questions, and I think if you are available, we would want to speak maybe to some of the key issues. I worked in sexual and reproductive health,
Okay.
so I would want to I would want to speak around parenting, introducing the bees story and
Okay.
how we go around the other things, you know,
Okay.
so that we get this information out there. But
Mhm.
uh that's a lot from me. I don't know if you have got any other words, anything that you want to say from your heart, unfiltered, before we call it a wrap for today.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything I would want to say, but I think I would want to comment on your family ritual that you were talking about. And I think that's very important, I think, because as a child, it was telling you that I have a voice, my experiences matter. And I think in a nutshell, that's basically what you want your children to feel, that, okay, my experiences, they matter. I'm being listened to. People are waiting, and it validates you and builds confidence. And it probably made you realize that you were loved. But I don't think that is actually the case in many homes. And I think it's something to encourage parents to do for their children. Yeah,
All right. No, thank you so much, Chiedza. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Chiedza Chikosi. Did I get that right?
absolutely. Yes.
Finally, finally, I got that right. Well, we've been talking about all things African parenting. Tell us your comments. Please leave your comment. Tell us your views about what we've been talking about. If you want, I really want to have further conversation with her on some touchy feely issues and bring it together. So if you want her, please tell us in the comments or send me a message on WhatsApp. But it's been a pleasure of having this conversation. I am your host, Tapiwa Makosa. Until we meet again, live right, love right, be humble, and be nice. Bye bye.
Thank you, Tapiwa. Bye.
Bye. All right. So this is where we end our recording.
Okay.
He is going to take that off air. So you edit
Okay.
it out.